Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Holosun 508T miniaturized red dot sight. I know quite a few people out there have been eagerly awaiting my review in the 508T, myself included. Based on my appreciation for Holosun's 507C, that particular optic, it's still in my evaluation process. It's at 10,000 rounds and it's still zeroed, still functional, and it's taken quite some abuse just based on my evaluation procedure, which you're probably familiar with. If you're not, I'll get more into it. The 508T is an improved version of that optic as far as I'm concerned, with a titanium body, but it lends itself with the same general features. It's got the same adjustments, it's got the same dual battery options, and the reticle is your same optional 2 MOA dot with a 32 MOA ring, which can be changed. You can do just 2 MOA dot, or if you wanted to, you could do just the ring based on the way that the settings work. Because it's dual powered, it's got a solar option, and if you're indoors or you're away from the sun, it's got battery options as well. As far as battery change goes, you would have to remove the optic to change the battery, and unfortunately the battery itself is not rechargeable. It's just two separate power systems, which, going back to the 507C, was a concern of mine. Was that going to make the optic more fragile? Which turned out with the 507C it did not, and I don't expect it to be a problem on the 508 either. But of course things can happen, and that's the whole reason why I do these evaluations. For features, the 508T has a very generous viewing window, and it's got a reticle, which I do like. I like the 2 MOA dot with the ring. I like it more for newer shooters than I do for myself, because I prefer a very small dot. So 2 MOA is really a good size for me. I do shoot 1 MOA pretty much predominantly, but using the 508T in just the dot mode only, or the dot and reticle mode, I really appreciate how clean, crisp, and effective their dot is. It's got a good color to it, which, you know, amber's supposed to be amber, but it's not always the case. And it handles all lighting conditions very, very well, being with those manual adjust options that I have. As far as power goes, some people, and this was brought up with the last video, I didn't talk about it when I came to features, is the shake awake. It's not really something I care for. I like dots that are just on. I get it, you're going to pick it up and it's going to come on, and that's perfectly reasonable. But I would just prefer an optic that just stayed on and could have the battery life and the notch filter on the glass to kind of support that behavior. But if it is something that you are concerned with, it does have that feature in it. Which, you know, some people are going to prefer. So it's a cool feature, and a lot of the things that went into Holosun's design of the 508T and going back to the 507 are kind of relegated towards, we're going to make sure that the optic lasts, the power source lasts as long as it can. Introducing that solar panel, of course, is cool, because the sun energy is free, but having a battery backup, which is also very smart, just in case there's not enough charge, if it had a rechargeable battery, which it doesn't, or if you quickly change lighting conditions. And changing lighting conditions quickly with the 508T, you do not notice really a switchover between solar to battery powered. The 508T also has 12 brightness settings, 10 for daylight conditions and 2 for night vision. Me, because I shoot a lot of night vision and slightly less night vision with handguns, I appreciate night vision settings on a pistol optic. I mean, you don't have to put it on a pistol, but that's primarily its intent, or at least that's what I'm going to use it for. So having those night vision settings is nice. Now we've got one more pistol optic out there that's going to provide us with night vision settings we can use. Now you can use any red dot sight without a night vision setting. It just creates more halo, more blooming when you're viewing it through a night vision device. So having dedicated night vision settings is something I seriously appreciate. As always, my 4-video initial review process is 2,000 rounds. Very first thing I did once I got the 508T mounted was zero it. So I want to show you that 5-round group. Now keeping in mind that this particular gun, this barrel life is right around 60-something thousand rounds and well over that on the gun itself. So it's not as, this particular barrel is not as accurate as it once was, but this is my 5-round group shot at 25 yards, shooting 124 grain gold dot. Next thing I got to is my 500 round burn down. I want to put 500 rounds through the gun as quickly as possible to see if it's going to cause any problems, in this case with the optic. 500 rounds is 500 rounds unless you do it as quickly as possible. That additional heat can create issues that you wouldn't otherwise see if you shot those 500 rounds over the period of weeks or months. So I wanted to see if that's going to create any issue. The burn down is kind of a staple of my review process. So without further ado, here is your 500 round burn down. Generally, it takes me about 3.5 to 4 minutes to do a 500 round burn down. Because this is a select fire gun, I was able to get it done about 1.5 minutes faster. I don't want to do the entire 500 rounds on select fire because I don't have to. 500 rounds is 500 rounds. But it definitely is easier on my digits and it's easier on my hands, but it's not any easier whatsoever on the optic. I'm pleased to say that the 508T did not experience any issues whatsoever with that accelerated 500 rounds, but we still got 1,500 rounds to go. There are two very big durability focus points that I'm worried about when it comes to pistol optics, and that's two things that can happen. One, maybe a little bit more likely than the other. One-handed manipulations. Because we have that nice big ledge, instead of manipulating off our rear sights like we do for one-handed operations, if that's something you have to do, people are going to manipulate off the optic body itself. And my caveat is always don't do that unless you absolutely have to, because the optic is literally how you're aiming, and you don't want to disturb that. That being said, it's something that I teach and it's something I advocate if you have to do it. So during my periodic process, I'm going to do a lot of one-handed manipulations, doing ball dummy drills, introducing basically dummy rounds randomly into my magazines during my personal practice, or in purposely taking it and just doing it for review processes to see if that repeated contact is going to create any issues with the optic. The 508T, just like the 507, it's got a pretty reasonably recessed lens, slight angle on it, so it's a little bit more recessed at the top than it is at the bottom, which is important because the manipulation contact is more likely to occur higher at the top or on the sides than it is down there where the optic sits against the slide of the firearm. I did a lot of one-handed manipulations and I didn't cause any issues, didn't lose zero, didn't cause any damage other than some cosmetic marring on the finish with the 508T. Of course, the next thing is drop testing. Very controversial, talk about it every video I bring it up. The reason I drop test isn't because I believe people are going to habitually drop their guns from a shoulder height. It's because shoulder height is a reasonable standard because I'm always the same height. Even though it's not perfectly scientific, there's also some random chaos introduced into it because the gun doesn't hit the exact same way every single time. The reason I do it is because of the force. I'm only interested in the force, and gravity's going to help me do that, and it keeps me from having to hit it with a hammer or something like that. Because guns come into contact with foreign surfaces all the time, whether it be one-handed manipulations, or if you think about from a duty or personal carry perspective, you could end up rolling around on the ground with a guy rolling your holster. If you're carrying the handgun as a secondary weapon, you could be going prone with your rifle or fetal prone or rolling around or doing whatever, and it could break the optic. And sometimes people bring up, well, that's not going to happen. I've seen it happen. My sample size of red dot handguns in general is very, very large because I teach a lot of red dot specific classes, but just during my own personal observation of students and professionally in my career, I've seen optics break simply coming in contact with the earth with having body weight on top of them. And personally, I would rather have an optic that could handle the drop test than one that couldn't. So now we got that caveat out of the way, that boilerplate, if you will, out of the way. Every 500 rounds, give or take, I did a full shoulder height drop test on the 508T. I want to show you that 5-round group again, because I'm going to show you a 5-round group I fired after the last drop test. So here again, real quick, is that 5-round zero confirmation group. And here is your 4 drops. So we got 4 shoulder height drop tests on concrete, and here is a 5-round group fired to see if it retains 0 after that last drop. 0 maintained. As far as damage goes, I've got some cosmetic marring to the top, and I've got a little bit of I don't even want to necessarily call them cracking. It almost looks like a delamination a little bit of the top notch filter, but it's definitely some type of spidering, chipping of the glass at the very, very top of the window. But that's after 4 shoulder height drops. If you remember back to the 507 video, I had suffered a little bit more damage to the lens at that point. The overall surface area and the rigidity and just the quality of design that goes in the 508T lends itself very well to the optic being really durable. That's 4 shoulder height drop tests, and I'm still zeroed, and I've still got a clean, clear window. Even if I had a crack all the way down the lens, I could still use the optic. It would still pass the test. That's obviously something I don't want, because there's a lot of other venerable optics out there. So what would make me choose this one over those? Well, speaking specifically on the 507C, it's in my top 3 of durable, what I would consider duty or carry optics. It's the durability and the reliability and the functionality lends itself very well to it being one of my top 3 optics. And just so no one asks, even though this isn't a comparison video, I'll talk about the other 2, Trijicon RMR and the Aimpoint Acro. Aimpoint Acro, Trijicon RMR, and the Holosun 507C in no particular order. I have no doubt whatsoever that the 508T will eventually replace, once I get the round count on it, the 507C as that number 3 slot. Like I said, no particular order, those 3 top bullet points. I think some people don't want the Holosun Optics 507C, but more particularly the 508T. They don't want it to be good because it's made by Holosun, and I can understand that. But there's also people out there that want the Delta Point Pro to be good because it is made by Leupold, and it's not. The 508T is a quality optic. Again, this is only 2,000 rounds, but just getting into it and with prior experience with the previous version, I guess if you will use that term, previous version of this particular optic, now we've got this titanium body, it just got better. It didn't change anything dramatically except for, I would say, increasing the reliability and the durability of the optic in general. One of my favorite features about the 508T is the reticle. I've got a 2 MOA with that 32 MOA ring. I think that lends itself very well if you're just getting into red dot shooting. This is the optic to get, because that reticle is going to give you a little bit more refined ability to get your dot presentation, to actually get your dot on the draw stroke, and it's going to shorten your learning curve. You may think about it like training wheels if you want. So I'm going to keep that ring, so on my presentation I've got a little bit more evidence of where I need to center my optic and how I need to get that eye-hand coordination alignment done to actually get my presentation and put my gun on target. And eventually you can just turn the training wheels off or just leave them on. It's not that big of a deal. The only time I really don't like the actual ring around my 2 MOA dot is under night vision shooting. I can still do it, but I would prefer it to just not be there. That ring gives you a lot of great advantages, especially, like I said, for newer shooters than you're going to see from some of the other optics out there. Of course, this isn't a comparison, but there aren't too many optics out there for handguns anyway that have a reticle style like this. The overall performance of the 508T is what I expected from Holosun going into it based on my performance with the 507C. It also comes in 2 reticle options. You can get green or red if that's something that you're into. I'm going to stick with red just for, that's my preference, is having that high contrast amber red color versus green, which in my experience kind of in certain environments blends in a little too much with what I'm trying to do, but that's just personal preference. It has the same footprint as the RMR, so it's very easy for you to find already milled slides for it, adapter systems for it, or just send your gun off, have it milled for an RMR footprint, and then go ahead and mount this optic up. And the price point is considerably less than some of the other optics that are out there, unless you're buying used, or you're buying like RMR, you're buying the Type 1 for what you're going to pay for the Holosun. The 508T's price is definitely different than the 507C, but that's still no reason not to get one. I think Holosun did a really great job in the design of this optic, and I think they were definitely thinking about the end user, and they were thinking about, we don't want to produce a hobby grade gun show optic. We want to produce something that people can trust for duty or personal defense carry. Because if you're putting an optic on your pistol and you're serious about it, then you're putting your life in the hands of that optic. So I appreciate the fact that they put in the work, but we're still able to provide an optic at a very reasonable price point. So if you have to be budget conscious, but you still want a duty carry optic or a personal defense optic, or you just want an optic on a handgun because you're dot curious and you want to get into it, but you don't want to invest a whole lot of money, there's absolutely no reason not to get the 508T. It's going to give you additional durability over the 507C, even though the 507C is a very high quality optic, which I've covered that in a past video. And it's something I'm definitely going to keep using, and I really find myself liking it more and more and more. It's a very streamlined, snag-free. I like the recessed control options. I like the multiple power settings. The shake awake is something I could live without, but it's on there and it's not like I'm going to turn it off. So I have a very long battery life. I have a very crisp, clean reticle that has options on it, 2 MOA, 35 MOA ring, or I can go with one or the other. And it's also something I can put in a student's hand who's a little newer to red dot shooting, and it's going to help them get used to that dot presentation draw stroke that they have to kind of refine coming from iron sights. There's a lot of value in it for not a lot of money. So if you're on the fence about Holosun because you feel like, oh, you know, I've heard bad things about them, stop hearing bad things about them coming from me. The 508T is an excellent optic. I'm Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.